Lingua Brutalica is a podcast that uses ethnographic interviews to study language use in the extreme metal community. We are studying a music scene known for its love of themes and topics generally considered offensive, and it is likely that some episodes will touch on topics or opinions some listeners may find tasteless or ethically problematic. Ethnographic researchers aim to adopt the interviewee's point of view so that we can draw out and study the attitudes, beliefs, and practices that are important to them. We want to make it clear that in presenting these conversations here, we do not endorse any of their content. Our aim is to explore the thought processes behind language use in this long-running, international and yet understudied scene. Hi, and welcome back to Lingua Brutalica with me, Jess Crook, and my co-host, Wes Robertson.
Hello.
In this episode, we have Jason down in Tassie here in Australia. Thanks for being with us, Jason.
Cheers for having me.
So, just to start off, can you describe for us Psycroptic's music? What kind of genre of metal do you fall into? Tell us all about it.
Cool. Well, I think we started out very much just as your typical sort of tech death band. And I think as our careers moved on, we've sort of, I don't know, we still get put into the tech death genre, but I think all the band members, we sort of more consider ourselves like a more modern tech thrash or just, modern thrash sort of band more than we associate ourselves with death metal these days, really.
I've never heard the term tech thrash before. Is that like,
No, it's not really a thing, but I suppose it's just more we keep getting put in the genre of tech death. And I mean, when you sort of look at where those sort of bands are at these days, your bands like Obscura, Archspire, Origin and stuff, we see that we're so far from that these days that we don't really associate ourselves as one of those sort of bands anymore. And I think we've got more of a thrash edge really than anything else, maybe sort of a bit of death metal drumming, but the riffing and the vocals are definitely, in my opinion, more down the line of thrash anyway. But yeah, it's all just labels anyway. it's all just extreme metal.
So when you all first got together to like make a band, was the sound like the I guess tech thrash kind of what you were going for, or how did you decide on what kind of style to play? Was there a genre that you all liked at the time, or did you have to kind of choose from an array of different influences among the band members?
Well, I wasn't in the band. I joined about 4 years into their career. So, but I think, I've always sort of been hanging around the band even since the inception and stuff, and being good mates with the band. And I think with all of us, it was just really at the time when the band started, everyone in the sort of the Tassie scene was really into the tech side of things. Your bands like Deeds of Flesh and Spawn of Possession, Disgorge, all that sort of stuff that was sort of going at that stage. I think it was just kind of one of those natural things. And Joe and Dave, the guitarist and drummer, who they're brothers, I think it's just sort of the way that their writing gravitated to begin with anyway. So, and then obviously the progression over 24 years or something the band's been around for now, obviously it's just moved in its own direction.
And has that always been the kind of music that you've gravitated towards, when you first started listening to music that falls within the kind of broader spectrum of extreme metal music?
I think we've all been quite broad on what we listen to. I mean, we're all right into our black metal, old school death metal, which back in the days when it wasn't old school death metal, it was death metal.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's just always, I don't know, just always the more extreme side of things. And I think even as I get older, I'm probably even looking for dirtier and heavier and more extreme music sort of as I get older, which is, I guess, a bit weird. Most people, I suppose, sort of change it down as they get older. Whereas I think because for me, I spent, years and years of just touring constantly. And over the last few years, it sort of hasn't been as much. I've been spending more time at home. I think I've sort of more I suppose, re-fallen in love with the genres a bit more again, now that it's sort of, I don't know, it's not my living as such at the moment. I'm not just out there playing shows and just surrounded by it all the time. So I think now that, my time at home, I'm just getting drawn to all this crazy shit that's that's coming out these days.
Well, so, when you were first getting into the genre, as someone that is now a singer, were you in tune with like the lyrics at all, or is that something you started to get an interest in once you started being a singer and performing?
That was definitely a later thing. I always liked the lyrics with the music, but it was never something that I really read too much into. It was more, young kid listening to Deicide and stuff like that, and thinking all the Satanism and stuff was cool and and that side of things. But I didn't really get more into like, looking at how stuff's written and, I suppose looking for things that were a bit more, not so much gore or your typical satanic sort of stuff. I don't think I really started looking into that even years into my career with Psycroptic. I mean, I wasn't the first, 2 albums I performed on, I didn't actually write the lyrics. So no, it was kind of one of those things. I didn't sort of fall in love with that side of things until, I'd been in the band for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years. But then when I sort of discovered, I don't know, I think I sort of found my style, or sort of discovered who I was with writing. I really fell in love with it.
Did you find like your opinion on metal lyrics changing as you kind of became more interested and like more attentive to metal lyrical practice?
Not really. No, I wouldn't say so.
What was the spark then that made you kind of go, hey, I want to actually write the lyrics?
Well, I think it sort of happened when around, what album was it? The Inherited Repression was the first one that I actually wrote for. I think like Dave had because Dave Haley, our drummer, he was writing the lyrics for the first couple albums I was on, and he sort of said to me when we came to starting to write the Inherited Repression, he said, just have a go at it, and if nothing that you do you're happy with, he said he'll take over, because he was going to do writing for it anyway, and he was just kind of encouraging for me to, just try and find your feet with it and see how it goes. And I think I wrote, I can't remember the first time, it might have been Euphorinasia or something like that on that album, and I sent it off to Dave and he checked it out and he was kind of like, dude, this is really cool, keep going. And and I kept writing, and I think I wrote maybe 5 songs on that album. And when it came around to the next album, Dave said to me, I can write some for you or see how you go. And when it came to writing the self-titled album, I kind of just got on a roll with it, and I was like, you know what, this is me. I've it's a place for me to talk to my audience like properly, I guess, in a way. And just I suppose I think when I was writing the lyrics myself, I kind of felt, I suppose, more valid in the band, if that makes sense. Like before I was just contributing a voice, I was doing all the vocal phrasings, putting the lyrics to the songs. But I think when it was my own words that I was putting to the songs and that I was singing, I think it just had a lot more meaning to me, and it just made, I don't know, it just made my part in the band feel more valid to myself almost.
So since you first started writing lyrics for Psycroptic, like, have you noticed any changes in the approach that you've adopted? Have you, if you were to look back on your work on the first album, do you think there's like any kind of clear differences you can see in the kind of lyrics that you write now versus back then?
Definitely. The stuff I was doing on the Inherited Repression, the songs I wrote on that were more from a, what would you call, like a fictional standpoint. Like looking at a story or an idea of, something fictional and going with that. Whereas I think when I got to the self-titled, I was starting to put more of my views on the world and my opinions on things, but trying to, I suppose, wind it up into something that was not so descript, so that, people can make their own their own opinions, I suppose, on, or take their own meanings from what my lyrics are. And I think so. After the self-titled, when we got to As the Kingdom Drowns, I think that's where I really sort of started taking, I suppose, looking at the world around me, and really just putting my opinions on everything into it, and just, I suppose, kind of lost that whole fictional storytelling side of things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Totally.
I'd say it lines up with some of the questions we're going to ask, actually. So, yeah.
Ah, sweet.
Yeah, well, in particular, like you've led in nicely to this kind of ongoing debate that we're going to ask you about, because on this podcast, we often kind of talk about what the kind of role of extreme metal lyrics, really is. And whether or not extreme metal should be viewed as kind of an escapist fantasy and entertainment, or kind of a genuine reflection of the artist's own kind of views and politics and identities.
Yeah.
So we wanted to know what your position on this is, especially because, if you look at the lyrics like over Psycroptic's catalogue, both those written before you joined the band and then after, you do have diverse lyrical themes, some of which are more fictional, more fantasy, particularly, during the Chalky era. But then, your more recent lyrics have been more grounded in the real world. So do you feel like you're kind of like striking this balance between the fantastic and the real? Does this reflect your view on the role of metal lyrics more broadly? What's your take?
I think to an extent you find with a lot of extreme music, you do find that a lot of people's opinions will come into it, even when it is, I suppose, the fictional side of things. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, like, to me, I mean, people are like, oh, lyrics got to have meaning, or, some people are like, oh, no, it doesn't matter. It's just got to be extreme, the gore stuff and that. And I just think, in my opinion, it just, like, look at what you're better at, look at what you feel comfortable with your writing, and don't force it. I mean, if you're a great writer of, like, gore lyrics and that side of the extreme, but maybe the political side of things, or like the real world views, if it's not something that really interests you or something that you're good at expressing, then I say don't do it. Look at where your strengths are always, and look at where your passions will lie. I mean, at the end of the day, with your music, I think, and writing, it needs to be close to you, it needs to be real, it needs to be honest. So I mean, for me, I'm not in the slightest bit interested in horror movies and stuff like that. So I'm not going to try and fake it that, and write about those sort of topics. So I think really, they're like, you just need to look at what your strengths are and what your interests are and what's honest to you, personally, anyway.
Is it possible to be honest to yourself and write, like, zombie stuff?
Not for me.
Not for you. I mean, just like in general, is there like?
But I mean, if that's the sort of thing you're interested in, I think it's coming from an honest place, and I think then go for it. But I think with, like, writing lyrics and writing anything in general, it's got to be something that interests you, something that you're into, rather than just putting words on a piece of paper that don't mean shit to you.
Interesting. Well, this kind of leads us into, we've gone over this a little bit. So to just kind of, like, broadly talk about your band's lyrics throughout their career as a whole. You have a number of what we might call, like, distinct lyrical eras, and that your first two albums, Isle of Disenchantment and Scepter of the Ancients, were written by the former vocalist. And as I mentioned, they're kind of fantasy epics talking about ancient battles and swords and demons. And the next two albums, Symbols of Failure and Observant, which were written by Dave, as you mentioned, are still a bit rooted in fiction, but there's a bit more sci-fi, and kind of focusing on humanity's ills as observed by, like, kind of inhuman creatures. So Symbols of Failure, for instance, describes immortal beings, keepers who design the human form are cleansing the earth. And Observant, the title track, seems to be about another inhuman being who can see the future but not the past. But then we enter your era with 2012's The Inherited Repression, which you mentioned. And that talks about, there's some fictional stuff in there, but you have real power imbalances, a person who's constantly being betrayed, exploited, and lied to by a more powerful elite or institution. The self-titled in 2015 is similarly grounded in the real world, talking about like the pursuit of wealth and environmental degradation. And in 2018, as Kingdom Drowns, this seems to be a continuation of this environmental theme, but focusing on Earth being reclaimed after humans have gone. And then Divine Council takes up these themes again in some ways, describing the triumph of nature, human illusions of control, and there's lyrics about a false conviction that fate isn't of our own making. So you've talked about, being attracted to these more real world, quote unquote, themes, but what makes you like think that you personally are more attracted to those? Like, where does that attraction come from? And also, was it hard to switch like that? Like, was there pressure to stay fantasy or stay sci-fi?
Nah, and I mean the rest of the guys in the band have always just said to me, just do what you do, and we've never put limitations on ourselves or each other in the band. So I mean, I don't know, I guess I don't know really why I sort of got drawn more to doing the real life stuff. I guess hardships within my own life, hardships that you see with people around you. And I guess, I don't know, for me, it's just the way things are at the moment. It's just an endless, what would you say? I suppose there's an endless inspiration. Well, not that it's a lot of what I write about's inspiring, because a lot of it's quite negative shit. But I guess it's just looking at what's going on around the world and the way people are living these days, and just putting my thoughts on it. I suppose a lot of it is just getting shit out of my head.
So there's no pressure, like when even not from the band, but just from yourself, that like when you started writing your own lyrics, thinking, "Oh man, our last two albums have been kind of sci-fi. If I don't do some sci-fi stuff, like some fans going to be like, hey, why aren't you guys the sci-fi band anymore?" Like that wasn't a concern.
No, and we've always been a band that we have. I mean, musically as well, not just lyrically. Stylistically, we've changed a lot over the years, and I think we've always had the attitude that with each album that we write, it's always different to the last in a lot of elements, and we always do have that thing that if people like what we do and they, like old fans stick with us, that's great. If we lose some fans for an album or a couple of albums or whatever, we're cool with that as well, because we need to do something. Like, essentially, the albums we write, they're for us first and foremost, and it's great that a lot of people come along for the ride and enjoy it. But yeah, there's never a concern of what's going to be, what reviews are going to say about lyrics or the music or the way things are done or whatever. So no, I mean, I suppose to answer your question, not really. We just do what we do, and we don't care the outcome so much.
Well, how about the lyrical style then? After you took over the lyric writing duties from Dave, did you feel any pressure to like emulate his style of writing, if not the actual kind of topics or themes that he or Chalky before him addressed?
No.
Or conversely, did you feel the opposite pressure to bring something totally different to the band?
Yeah, I think more than anything, I really wanted to bring myself to the table more than anything, and that comes through, I guess, with the actual, like, my vocal, like, singing style as well. I mean, to start with, when I did performed on Symbols of Failure, it was very much that whole, it's got to be fast, it's got to be extreme, because that's what Chalky did before, and all the rest. And it was kind of, I suppose that album was transitioning. It's like, keep it sort of familiar to what the fans are, but then by the time Observant came around, Dave was like, you just do you with that. And then when I started writing lyrics, it was like, do you, don't try and emulate what's happened before. Like, just do what's natural to you, do what's comfortable to you. And, you're fronting this band, so bring you to the table, I guess, more than anything. So, yeah, I did feel like I had to, I suppose, stand out and do my own thing from, I mean, obviously having two lyricists before me in the band, I suppose there was a little bit of pressure on that to bring something different to the table, I guess, rather than just emulating what people had done before me.
When you were writing lyrics for the first time, did you read over the prior albums to kind of see what had been done? And I mean, I know you sung it, but like because you're familiar with them there. But did you like review?
It is different actually when singing someone else's lyrics a lot of the time, and I mean just singing in general, you're not really taking in what you're saying a lot of the time. Maybe some of the choruses you might sort of catch a bit of a feel from it, but generally, yeah, you don't. But I don't think I really did read over any of the stuff. I was sort of reading over what Dave had sent me, because he sent me a few sets of lyrics for the Inherited Repression album as well, like right in the beginning. So I was kind of looking at what he was doing, and I guess and thinking, shit, I got to make sure mine's good, because Dave's writing was really great on that. The songs he contributed on that album as well. So I suppose it maybe put a bit of pressure on me to keep up with him on it as well, just with quality sort of standards.
What do you think makes for like low quality metal lyrics broadly?
Not much thought.
I mean, how can you tell when there's not much thought though,
Yeah, well, I suppose that's a good question. I mean, for me, I know I spend hours on stuff, but sometimes I get better results when it's spontaneous and it's just the first thing that comes to mind. So yeah, I don't know. That's probably that's probably a difficult one for me, actually.
I mean, have you ever? Go ahead.
I suppose, like for me, I suppose in my opinion, poorly written lyrics are something that doesn't grab me when I read it. It doesn't make me want to, when you start reading through, lyrics and stuff. If you get like one verse in and you haven't got your attention peaked on it or whatever, or something of interest, or it feels directionless, maybe, I suppose that would be poorly written. If you don't feel like you want to read right till the end. I suppose the same like a novel as well. But whether that's poor writing or that's just something that doesn't interest you, I suppose that's another question there as well.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask, is it the topics that tend to turn you off, or is it the actual like style of language that's used to, explore those themes that,
See, I don't know,
makes or breaks it?
So I think like an album to me, and it's a very different style of writing to me, but it's something I always loved, was on some of the later Marduk albums, where they've got a real sort of World War II, World War One theme going throughout their stuff, but then they bring in this, like, very cleverly bring in like these sort of satanic elements to it, and it doesn't feel forced. It just flows smoothly. It's kind of hard to describe, but I remember when I first read through the lyrics on the French Wine album, that was sort of one that really sort of grabbed me, and I was like, fuck, these guys have really put everything into it.
Is there an inverse case where you liked an album and then you read the lyrics and you're like, oh, I don't like that album so much anymore?
I can't think of any off the top of my head, but me and Todd, our bass player, actually, we spoke about this when I sent through all the lyrics for As the Kingdom Drowns, and he was reading through them all, and I said, so what do you think? And he said, they're awesome. And he said, they're lyrics that when I read them, it makes me like the album more. He said, because he said, I get so disappointed when I really love an album and then I read the lyrics and I can't stand the lyrics. He said, it just detracts from the album for me. So it does happen. I can't think of an instance off the top of like a particular album where that's happened, but it definitely has happened before, where, I don't know, sometimes when you listen to music, you can form something in your head what you think they're saying, especially with extreme metal, obviously, because it's not the clearest vocal style, and you can form a picture in your head, or you can think in your head what they're actually saying. But sometimes when you actually do read it, it's a bit like, oh shit, it's not what I thought, and it's nowhere near as cool as what I thought it was either.
Well, talking more about your kind of lyrical style, in addition to kind of the thematic changes that we talked about earlier, we did notice that your lyrical style is really quite distinct from that of Chalky and Dave, because Chalky's lyrics often read kind of more like prose than traditional lyrics. Like if we take the title track off The Isle of Disenchantment as an example, you have lyrics like darkened waters lying before me, many secrets that we can't see, a strange fairy guided by a corpse takes me to an island where I must survive. I cannot see for the mist is too thick. The ferryman's face rotting makes me sick, and kind of so on. Which, although rhyming kind of read like they are kind of lifted from a novel almost. And then Dave's lyrics also appear quite narrative driven. So for instance, like lyrics from the song An Experiment in Transience read, strapped to the mechanism, I prepare, essential wires attach, restraints hold me into position. I'm ready, the flick of a switch steals the commencement. A controlled electric current is administered. A short-lived pain I must pass through is mere token price. Clinically dead, yet I feel so alive. Your lyrics really kind of depart from this trend, as they don't tend to tell kind of narrative stories. Instead, your lyrics do kind of, as you suggested, kind of read more like kind of commentary on the current state of the world. So they're kind of less prosaic. So if we take like, the first song, Rend Asunder, off your latest release, you have lyrics like, our world is torn, locked in our prisons, uncertainty of this new life, no end in sight, involuntarily created by us, servitude and ignorance we spoke of, yet actions were silent, a life beyond our means, sustainable future, just a dream, we forfeited our right to survive. So were you aware of this specific kind of difference in your lyric writing approach? And did you try to avoid kind of including any kind of prosaic or kind of narrative structures in your style?
Yeah, I definitely did. Like I was saying earlier, I like people to be able to read my lyrics and interpret different meanings, or take the meaning that's, I suppose, like from how they interpret it, essentially. Which it's and that's been an interesting thing, because over the years on tour and stuff, when we've been out on the road, I've had a lot of people say to me, "Oh, hey, this song, what do you mean by this?" And you can have a discussion. It's like you're like miles from what my idea was originally, but when they're describing their take on the song, it's like it makes perfect sense from the words I've used. And so it's always interesting from that point of view. And I suppose even as a lyricist, when you're, how would I describe it? When you're, I suppose, putting your views on the world, it can be confronting is not probably the right word. It can be, I don't know, you can feel very, can't even think of the word, like you're putting a lot of yourself out there into the world, like a lot of who you are. And sometimes it's kind of, you feel like you don't want to be too straightforward with things, if that makes sense. So I suppose
why not?
You can feel vulnerable, very vulnerable, putting in like lyrics that are close to your ideas out there. So sometimes I suppose it's just a bit more comfortable to wrap them up and make people think about them.
Even though they're all like screamed and stuff? Does that create like a little barrier of
I think
comfort?
so, yeah. Yeah, probably more than, I reckon so. Because, I mean, we always put our lyrics in the booklets and so, and the thing is, a lot of people don't read them. A lot of people just listen to the music and they don't know what the fuck I'm saying. But there is those people that, that do read it and try to interpret it.
Well, another thing that we kind of noticed as a change is that when you took over, there was a bit more chorus repetition. Like in the song "This Shattered World," you have the repetition of lines: "The fires from the deep, they yearn for me, longing for this moment for centuries. Now this gift may seem like a curse." And the prophet's counsel repeats the lines: "Fires burn stronger on approach, as if the sun itself had come to us. Our treachery is soon to be forgotten. History shall be erased for all." Did you kind of aim to add choruses to the band, or in whether or not? Oh, sorry.
That was something I think that me and Joe sort of really started bringing in on the self-titled album. I think when we did the self-titled album, I think "Echoes to Come" was the first single. Well, was the first single off the album, but it was also the first song we wrote for the album. And when I first got sent the music for it, to me it was like screaming like there was a section of it which seemed like it should be built into an epic chorus, which we ended up doing. And when we sort of built that up and we put, sort of clean operatic vocals and all sorts of stuff on it, I think with that, me and Joe were kind of like, right, maybe we could really do something with this. And we were at the point, I suppose, musically in our career where we were wanting to strip things back and focus more on actual songwriting rather than the tech, element of things. Mm-hmm. And I think with that, we wanted to bring more hooks into it and more memorable moments and bigger songs, and we were really considering the live thing more as well. And it was, so it was a conscious decision, I suppose. Once we saw that it was something that we could do successfully, and we really liked adding that element in, it ended up being basically a big staple of our thing to add the more epic choruses, and just also making it so that if you've got a catchy lyric, if you repeat it and bring it back on sections, it gets stuck in people's head. And I guess as a musician, you want people to walk away singing your songs or humming your songs and getting them stuck in their head. That's a big part of what you do. And I suppose adding repetition into things is a big part of, I suppose, drilling it into people.
Do you feel any nerves at all now, like when you have to write a chorus? Because, it has to be catchy, it has to be memorable, it has to stick with people.
Yeah, I often do with a lot of the songs. I often do actually start with the chorus.
Okay.
So I've had quite a few of the songs. It'll be when I've had all music sent through to me, it'll be, you sort of get yourself into a mindset of, your brain's always ticking on lyrics and words, and I'm listening over and over and over to the music, driving around in my car, running, whatever. And it's almost like little phrases will come to you, and a lot of the time I'll build on them first, and then it's like, it's okay, where am I going to go with this? And you almost write the song around that chorus.
So the chorus has sometimes had like the most time spent on it in a way because you started with it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, well, in terms of your language use, your lyrics occasionally feature some obscure vocabulary like exodus, referring to death resulting from disease, and euphorinasia, which seems to be, if I'm not mistaken, a blend of your own making, combining euphoria and euthanasia. Yeah. But generally speaking, those examples aside, there seems to be a preference for not necessarily simple but familiar language. So, for example, the opening lyrics to Rend Asunder, our world is torn, locked in our prisons, uncertainty of this new life, no end in sight, which we mentioned earlier. And that seems to include words that, most English users would recognize, if not understand. Yeah. So were you kind of aware of this trend? Did you actively kind of trend towards more familiar rather than obscure vocabulary?
I try to keep things simple. I do write with a thesaurus all the time, though. And
you do?
That's
okay.
More than anything, that's for because obviously writing lyrics isn't essentially just writing poetry as such. It's got to fit to the music. So a lot of the time, I'll have, I might write a verse, but then it's like, there's not enough syllables in a certain word that I'm using. So then you can sort of hit the thesaurus and like, okay, this word's slightly got that extra syllable that I need. So I use it a lot of the time from that point of view. So a lot of I suppose the more obscure words, they can often come from, they just had the right amount of syllables in it that I needed to reach for a rhythmic point of view.
We've had people on this podcast be, both in praise of the thesaurus and also against it. You said you use it quite frequently.
Yeah.
Like, I guess, do you understand the thesaurus hate, or have you heard it from anywhere before? Are you like,
no one's said to me about it. I could see that there would be purists out there going, nope, definitely can't use a thesaurus. But I reckon, I don't know, use all the tools you can to get the job done. It's like a guitarist, if they if they know all the scales on a guitar, it's gonna just give them another tool in their toolbox, isn't it? So I see the thesaurus as just the same sort of thing for a lyricist, really.
Like, can you use a thesaurus too much? Like, have you ever seen lyrics where like this person needs to like stop using the thesaurus?
It gets to the point. I guess it gets to the point if they don't know what they're actually saying.
Okay.
Because their words are too full on. But I mean, I don't know. I suppose it just depends what you're going for. For me, I don't want people to read my lyrics and go, "What the fuck is that word there? I've never heard of that." And then they have to look it up and stuff. And if your lyrics are full of that, it's not going to have that catchy factor either. People like simple,
I mean, I guess doesn't using a thesaurus go against that perspective though in a way? Because like you don't use a thesaurus to find like simple words, right?
No, that's true. But I don't know. I think like for me, it's mainly from extending words or shortening words for that point of view, regardless.
Like within like the measure that you have, kind of.
Yeah. I mean, when you're trying to write to an actual song, and you might come up with a really cool line that's sort of got a cool meaning, but then when you try it out to the actual music, you're like, oh shit, it doesn't fit or whatever. So that's where it comes in for me. Or every now and again, sometimes I will, I suppose if you do get a bit stuck on a line and you're like, fuck, I can't think of a next line, or you get that writer's block or whatever, sometimes you can just go looking through thesauruses, dictionaries, find a cool word, what's that mean? And you can end up going, like, sometimes you can go down a bit of a rabbit hole and you can draw some ideas from them as well. But I'm not one of those people that will just use big words nonstop for the sake of it, if that makes sense. You do get a lot of people, I suppose, they like using the big words. I don't know if it's that they like to sound intellectual with things or what, but yeah, I mean, that's not my thing, really. Oh shit.
Well, actually, you mentioned syllables earlier, and this kind of relates to another question that we wanted to ask, because, whilst your style of language is familiar, it's certainly not monosyllabic. In fact, your lyrics include quite a lot of multisyllabic words, particularly those ending with shun or, so Tion or Sion.
Yeah.
As lyrics from, Inherited Repression, that's another one, feature 41 shun forms.
Really?
Self-Titled has 22. As the Kingdom Drowns has 12, and Divine Council has 27. Is that surprising?
I guess. It's probably from a rhythmic point of view, I guess. A lot of that stuff. It might be that I'm subconsciously, it might be a syllable style that is easy for me to get out when I'm doing. I mean, when you're going full noise at the top of your lungs, sometimes it can you will gravitate to words or certain syllables and stuff, I guess, that are easier for the delivery, maybe as well.
This is a weird question, but if my memory is correct, our first episode with Harlot.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So my memory is right.
Yeah, you're right.
Wow. All right.
I know exactly. Right. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So Hudson of Harlot is a thrash, right? And you described yourself at the beginning of this interview as thrash, and he likes the shun words as well. Is there
is this a thrash style?
Yeah. Is this like a thrash dialect?
Hey, it might just be one of those things that just with our delivery of how we sing this style, I guess it might just be something that's easy to get out rhythmically. I think anyway, that's probably more what it is for me, because when I am writing, I don't write the lyrics and then try to fit them to the song. I'm more I've got the song in front of me, I'm listening to the section of the song that I'm trying to write for, I get the words for it, I trial it. If some words are too hard to get to, things will get changed. So I'm doing the whole thing at one time. So it is writing the lyrics and making sure it's possible to sing it and that it actually sounds cool as well. And hence, like I say, with the thesaurus to get the extra syllables or cut syllables down and stuff like that. And so it might just be one of those things that I do subconsciously that, yeah, they're just easy words for me to get out and make sound cool. So maybe I tend to gravitate towards them.
Okay. Well, you mentioned like you wanted to have language that's pretty, easy to read, and a lot of language is definitely familiar, but a lot of it still would kind of seem out of place in like an everyday communication context. For instance, in Renda Sundari of the line "servitude and ignorance we spoke of," which you'd say like we spoke about servitude and ignorance, right? Why not? Do you think there's a reason that you tend to write in a way that's distinct from conversational English? Like it's instead of saying we talked about slavery and ignorance, using servitude and ignorance we spoke of. Is there like an intent there to make your lyrics feel not like conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I know I do also. You've probably noticed this. I often put a lot of questions in my lyrics, I think, as well. But I think, yeah, I suppose it's more that trying to keep it not sounding like it's me talking to you type thing. It's like some greater being overruling everything, I suppose, is how I don't know, I kind of envision it a lot of the time.
Okay, interesting. So with that in mind, like, I mean, how does that work with like other examples? Like, so there's one example that we did see that's, I suppose very far removed from everyday language, which is the use of the Old English thee that only appeared once in one lyric that I found. So winds of time, I command thee, once forsaken in the shadow world, conquered by my own self. So as no doubt you already know, metal has this very well recognized penchant for archaic expression, including kind of the thee and thou forms. So we were wondering what made you include the thee. Does it connect with what you were just talking about regarding this kind of like omniscient kind of being, or
Those lyrics were I do remember when I wrote those, I was trying to do something different to how I normally would, and I was, I suppose, trying to look at more of a black metal approach. I remember with that song, I was looking through, which album was it? It was an Emperor Anthems to the Welkins at Dusk. I remember I was reading through that. It was either the day before or I don't know. It was sort of around the time that I wrote that song. And I think they were using a lot of thou and those sort of words. And I think that was probably the inspiration that sort of led me to use that sort of language. But I do remember it was definitely me trying to take more of that sort of old black metal-y sort of approach to it.
Okay.
Well, one kind of, I guess, literary-ish feature that's missing from your lyrics is rhyme. You only rhyme a very, very small amount. So, for instance, on the inherited repression, you have lines like "purged of their very essence, it was you who turned them caustic, infecting them, confusing them with this horrid sentence." So, essence and sentence. Self-titled is rhyming lines like "see what, say what, they want never, come out striking to whatever." And "the kingdom drowns" features "cast out now, no turning back, on this day all turns to black." And Divine Counsel has a rhyme as well, as in "as the mind slips away, can't stop it now, this earthly decay." But these are kind of rare examples and few and far between. Like we've cherry picked them. So why do you use rhyme so sparingly? Like you don't throw it out completely, but you do use it a very, very low amount. Is that because you don't like it very much, or do you think it has like more impact in tiny bits?
I think it stands out more when it's used sparingly. I think it just has more impact. I think I got nothing against like bands that do a lot of rhyming stuff, but I think it loses the impact. It's like when you do like a really fast blast beat on the drums or something. If you're doing it the whole way, it kind of loses its impact and the wow factor or whatever. But if you use it sparingly, it just comes in here and there. It's like fuck, and it really grabs you. And I suppose it's from that point of view, you got something cool. If you overuse it, it loses the impact.
is there, when you write a rhyme, excuse me, is there pressure to make it really good then?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time, I think so. But and a lot of the time, it is, I suppose, me doing like the actual flow or the idea I've got from the rhythmic perspective as well, depending on what's happening with guitars and that side of things as well. So it all sort of comes down to that, back to that whole thing of me writing at the same time as I'm, actually figuring, or, fitting it to the song. So sometimes it might be, I don't know, it might be running through and then the last line, it might be like, all right, it feels right to put a rhyming word here rather than anything. So I suppose it's just how I feel at the time when I'm actually doing the rhythmic side of things as well.
Right.
Whether I think it needs it or whether I think it would enhance the song, I suppose is probably the better way to put it.
Makes sense. Yeah, pretty straightforward.
Yeah. I mean, we also wanted to ask you about your use of perspective because we did notice some shifts across your albums. So firstly, on the inherited repression, there seems to be a preference for the second person perspective with just, 10 uses of I, 16 uses of we, and then 20 of you. And this trend continues on self-titled with only one use of I, 18 of we, and then a massive 50 of you. But then it switches. So your last two albums shift away from you and towards we, with 14 and 6 uses of you, but 18 and 45 instances of we. So were you aware of this shift? Did you have any ideas as to why it has occurred?
No, but I know that the perspective is always something I struggle with. I often find when I'm writing lyrics, I'll be doing it from the me perspective, and then by the end of it, I've actually got it from somebody else's perspective. Looking back at me, it's just like, shit, I don't know how that happened, and then often it means I have to go back and rewrite because it gets to the point. Because you can get, when I'm writing, I can get sort of tied up in things, and before you know it, you do get sometimes where your whole idea has shifted from the start of the song to the end, and you might be on a totally different topic, and then you've got to bin things and start again or start backtracking. And so I know that the perspective thing is one thing that I've always found challenging with that. Like just as I write, how can it very commonly does happen that it switches perspective. And I guess I probably at that point, I look at which perspective is the cooler one for the song when I go to the corrections.
So if you switch perspective, then is the you in a song sometimes you?
Like me.
Yeah. Are you singing to yourself as the second person?
Yeah, I guess. It's a weird one. And that is really something that's always tripped me up, and I always have to really consciously, like once I've finished a song that I'm happy with, I do have to go back and a few days later and look at those types of things and think, am I actually making sense in some whatever sort of form? So yeah, and that's always the thing that I've always struggled with, like keeping on track with.
Why do you think you struggle with that? Do you know?
I have no idea.
No idea?
Maybe I'm just a crazy person. No.
Well, let's talk about some specific instances of you then, maybe, because Jess was thinking that the uses on inherited repression in the self-titled album for you seem to be kind of provocative in lyrics like, your life turned to rubble, face the fact that it won't get better, your fault, your choices. How long can you keep it up now? The illusions seen through eventually, which seem to be like almost attacking or accusing the listener of not owning up to responsibility for their own actions or choices. When you use you like this, is there someone you have in mind? Are they directed at a particular group or person? Is it yourself, or are you like yelling at the listener?
No, that one was very much that was quite directional. It's quite an aggressive song, actually, looking back on it. But that was definitely me pointing the finger at someone else. But just looking at, I mean, people not owning up to their shit, basically, not taking responsibility for their own actions, and then crying when nothing goes their way, basically. So that's definitely a pointing the finger at someone else type song.
What happens like live when you're singing a song that's pointing the finger at somebody and you're like staring right into the audience? Does it ever feel a bit awkward?
Nah. You just got to put on a scary face while you do it. That's always one that I always and I often think about that. A couple of people have said it to me as well, like the "your fault, your choices" line. It's one that I always point at someone in the crowd. I've had people like, "What did I do?" But yeah, I think even on the film clip for that song, I'm pointing at a crowd member.
Aw.
Has anyone kind of like come to you and tried to like guess like who the you is, like whether it's a generic you or a specific you?
It's a generic thing. It's not like directed at someone that's like done me wrong or anything like that. I'm not quite that malicious that I'll air my dirty laundry to the world.
Well,
yeah.
Go ahead, Jess.
I was going to say, like, when you're writing about we, then, like, are you thinking about a particular group of people, or is that also like a generic kind of, I suppose, like humanity?
Yeah. It's usually that generic big we, everyone around my people. So, I suppose more. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do you feel included in that we, or is it like, are you separate from that?
Yeah. No, I'm always part of it. It's always my crew.
And is that like, I mean, do you feel differently about it? Just because like you mentioned earlier, right, that like, you know, when you're like singing lyrics that you wrote versus like lyrics that like others have written before you, that you know, have a slightly different kind of like understanding and connection to them. How does that relate to the perspective then? Like when you sing about like I or we, you know, that you've written yourself, does that feel different than if you're singing from the I or we perspective in lyrics that you haven't wrote?
Not really. I mean, a lot of the time when you're on stage and you're actually performing this stuff, you're almost just on autopilot. You're just performing it, and you're caught up in the moment, and you're not so much thinking about the words that are coming out of your mouth. Mm-hmm. Like there is that whole thing of pointing at someone when you say the word you or whatever like that. But that's, I don't know. That's just almost like what would you say? Like I don't know, like a character, you're in character type thing, almost.
Interesting. What do you mean by like in character? Because you said you wrote from kind of a more personal perspective, right? Is the stage
in character? As in, you know, when I'm on stage, I'm not the same casual person I am. Like sitting here talking to you guys is sort of what I mean. Like you're on stage, and you know, I suppose as the vocalist, you've almost got to make not almost. You have to make yourself the biggest person in the room. So that's what I mean by character. You're up there with the mic, yelling at the crowd, full of vibrato, and you know all the rest of it, which is the total opposite of what I am in day-to-day life. So that's what I mean when I say on stage. You know, in character, I'm in character up there.
Right.
It's me oozing confidence, which I. In just day-to-day life.
Well, before we move on from pronouns, we did want to ask as well, like, what's the effect of using the we perspective when you're talking about issues like environmental degradation or humans failing to reckon with our role in all of that?
I suppose it's putting the blame on everybody, not just myself. That'd be the simplest way, I suppose.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
Straightforward, yeah.
Yeah. No, some answers are short. It's great.
Yeah.
I know a lot of with my writing. I mean, a lot of it just starts from a simple idea, and I suppose wording just makes things sound more elaborate, maybe.
Well, speaking of kind of elaborate things, one thing we noticed in your written lyrics is a lot of punctuation, ellipses, colons, dashes, or hyphens. Although this has kind of dropped off, but for instance, on inherited repression, there are 6 instances of ellipses, 5 dashes, and 2 colons. Then after that, we see only hyphens or dashes, and there's just 2 hyphens in the self-titled release. But As This Kingdom Drowns has 7 M dashes, and your latest record has 5 M dashes, as in the lines, "Wind screams my name, consumed by powers, dash, beyond comprehension, my sentence revoked, dash, deeds of a past life." Obviously, you don't sing dashes, you don't sing ellipses, you don't sing punctuation,
No.
but they're all included in your lyrics, right? So why have you added these written only forms into the lyrics, I suppose?
I suppose my way of interpreting the way I'm delivering when I first started working with Psycroptic, this was back in the days where you couldn't simply just record your ideas over the music. So I'd have the lyrics would be getting written and stuff, but to do the phrasing to prepare for the studio, I ended up with a lot of different symbols and stuff of, like I'd have dots under words to signify how it was actually sung. So I almost had my own little set of symbols to actually, when you actually write written sheet music out, there's all the symbols and the notes and everything on it. I developed my own way of putting a lyric sheet into the vocal phrasings and how it was actually sung, which I'm going to have to dig out some of the old lyric sheets from when I was in the studio on the early albums, because it'd be funny to see the way I used to do it. But I think it's just a continuation of that. It's almost me putting the punctuation in as to how I feel I'm saying it when I'm actually singing as such. I suppose it's following the delivery of the way I'm singing, if that makes sense.
Is so like you're attempting to bring the written closer to the audible?
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
Huh. I mean, like things like M dashes, etc., are often associated with poetry. I mean, Emily Dickinson being the key one. Is there any like subtle desire to make the written lyrics look more poetic, or is it all just like this is how I scream it?
I think it is more just it's more about the way I deliver it, and so that's the way I write it down. And then no one ever tells me I'm wrong when it goes to proof.
Do you ever like think about how your listeners like will read the lyrics? I mean, do you have any desire for listeners to actually read through the lyrics that you've written, like, and kind of consume them as like a text that's like, if not independent to, then like kind of a companion to the audio recording or live performance?
Definitely. I mean, that's why when I do lyric writing, I've always tried to make it so, like we were talking about earlier, it does enhance the music so that the listener's not going to read it and go, oh my God, what is this directionless garbage he's singing? So I do, the amount of time that I do put into it, the time and effort that go into the lyrics, I do want listeners to read them. I do want them to enjoy them and to be an enhancing part of the music. I mean, whether or not they do, I mean, a lot of these days, especially when where you got Spotify and all the streaming platforms and stuff, I know that it's not like what it used to be back in the 90s or the early 2000s where you'd get the CD or the cassette or whatever and you would put the album on, you'd open the lyric sheet.
Yeah.
Like, and it was that old. I mean, I guess I'm from that old school of that's how you used to consume your music, or at least the first time that you would listen to an album. It'd be from start to finish. You'd be reading the lyrics with it. And I guess I'd still like for people to do it that way. I know that, probably 80% of people maybe don't, but for those few that do, I do want it to be worthwhile. I want it to be a rewarding experience for them to read the lyrics while they listen to the album and go, oh, fuck, he's written some good lyrics or whatever. So yeah, long story short, I do like that the idea that it would be a companion to it.
No, I mean, I'm guilty of streaming things as well, but I do kind of miss that there was a certain joy of like whipping out
nostalgic.
Whipping out the lyric book, and when it was really well done. I mean, there were a lot that were just like here's some pictures of us in the dark with the lyrics on top, but like every
Yeah.
once in a while a band would really make it. Like the one that sticks out in my mind is Slipknot's Iowa was like printed on butcher paper.
Oh, okay.
And that like ruled. Yeah, that was like I don't think that's. I mean, I don't know. Like I don't see CD stores and stuff that much anymore. But
No.
it was nice having like oh the entire thing is like a unit. The music and the insert
Yeah.
and the entire like the art
And-
form is 3-dimensional and audible.
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, that's the thing I always say as well. Like you've got the cover art, you can really like have a good look at it and read the lyrics along with the album and even down to the thanks list and, the whole package. Yeah, I'm very much from those days where like, consuming an album was, I mean, it was like the highlight of your week when one of your favorite bands put something out and you'd put the time in to go and, buy it from a store and then come home, put it on, read the lyrics, all that stuff. It was like, I don't know, it was a big ritual that came with it. And I think you attached a lot more value to it than what you do with streaming. And myself, I stream most of my music now as well, no doubt. But yeah, the nostalgia thing, it still gets me as well.
For sure. Well, to go back to your lyrics, though, there's one other theme that we kind of noticed. That is that there's a theme of fire and flame that kind of runs throughout the lyrics you've written. So in 2012's The Inherited Repression mentions, and I don't know, this was co-written, you said, so,
yeah.
But still there's flame in hand, flames alluring, and writing and teachings turn to ashes. 2015 Psycroptic references smoke. Fire cleanses the earth. The glaciers melted. The heat turned all to dust, setting the skies ablaze, dying in fire. Fire engulfs the night. And even the song Cold, ironically, talks about fire of time burning faster. Then in 2018, you have with As the Kingdom Drowns, opens with rising from the flames as our world burns and mentions the flickering candle of life. And then in 2022 with the Divine Council, you have fires of the deep, fires have been burning too long, ashes of our empire, fires burn stronger on approach, and the request, don't put the fire in my hands. So while you have songs like Cold and Frozen Gaze, obviously the kingdom drowns, that's water, but there seems to be a pretty clear preference for fire as a metaphor throughout your lyrics. Do you know why this might be?
Just mad satanic. No, I don't know, to be honest. When you started reeling that off, when you first started, I thought, shit, I could totally remember, coming across things. I didn't realize I did it that much. But yeah, when you started reeling them off, I realized obviously I do. I don't know why that is actually. Maybe it's just, I don't know, it's an easy one to go to maybe for extreme music.
Well, like you got, I mean, broad stereotypes, right? Like black metal has the freezing cold winters, right? There are other options. You got the like, I don't know, there could be the dirt of the earth, right? The grave. Like, why do you think fire is your element? I mean, you could even do like the Dragon Force sky and clouds and stuff, right? There's we talked to Earthrot. Earthrot does like ocean stuff. Like, why do you think fire is your element?
I don't know, to be honest. I don't know. I've probably got flames and all sorts of shit on my t-shirts that I wear. I don't know. It's funny actually, within a lot of my artwork as well, because I do a lot of digital art and like digital painting and stuff. I have so many of them. I have elements of fire in my artwork as well. So I don't know what it is.
Obviously, a very recurring theme there.
Yeah. I might be an arsonist. I just don't realize it yet.
Sorry, is it? Or like is your art helping you avoid
it's
crime?
Yeah.
It is. The need to burn churches down like in the old days.
Well, this discussion of fire does lead to another theme that we noticed in your writing, which seems to be increasing. So that is the reference to the death of the planet and humans as failed stewards. So obviously, let us know if we're kind of misreading these songs. But in 2015, you mentioned smoke rising from beneath the core, empowered by the wealth, it rapes the land. What the future brings, none of us could know. It's as if we deny the truth we know. On Echoes to Come, which we take as kind of warnings about the excess wealth damaging the earth. Then on 2018, We were the keepers. By its name, kind of appears to be a clear remand of humans' failures to protect the environment, with lines like, one day it all comes back again, the soil reclaims what was taken, nothing ever belonged to us, for we were just the keepers. And in 2022, you have lines like sustainable future, just a dream, we forfeited our right to survive, or discover and destroy, this has always been our way, in empty fields we walk, watching as we fade. We are the cause, the great cancer of this world. So if we're interpreting your intent correctly, why do you think that you return to this topic of environment so regularly, and specifically this kind of environmental degradation or death?
Because I just think it's an important topic. More than anything, I'm a lot of the time it comes from something I've seen or heard about, recently, around the time of writing and stuff. And I think now, I think when I was younger, you never would have got these sort of lyrics out of me. I think it would be something that was, whatever, it's down the track. It doesn't appeal to me. Now I have 2 children. Things of environmental issues and all that side of things actually are more important to me, I suppose, because I don't think it probably won't be in my lifetime that there will be massive changes, but my children's lifetime, they'll be the ones that are left to deal with this shit, or grandchildren, whatever, and I suppose that side of things is, as I get older, is more of a reality to me now. And so I guess from that point of view, I gravitate towards that.
Well, interesting, because I did see in another interview that you did where you were kind of asked a similar question, that you kind of connected this theme of environmental degradation in your lyrics to, your place of residence, so in Tasmania. So could you tell us about that?
Wow. I mean, we've got Tasmania's a beautiful place, obviously. But, I mean, down here, there's so much efforts taken in Tasmania to protect the wilderness and stuff, except there's a giant hole in the ozone layer above us, which kind of sucks. But it's not nice. But I mean, coming from such a naturally beautiful place as well, I suppose if you grow up and you're just in a big city, concrete everywhere, tall buildings, maybe the natural world doesn't have as much of an impact on you because you're so far removed from it. But I think, growing up in rural Tasmania, it's very much part of everyday life. I mean, you can see down here the seasonal changes, like what I was saying before, like it's been for the last 3 years, winter's been warmer. It's not like the brutal place that it used to be in winter anymore, and that side of things. So I suppose, just the natural environment around me as well does inspire me to do my bit to protect or raise awareness or whatever in my own roundabout way.
So this next question is a little bit, I'll just cop it. I wrote this question. I feel a bit bad about it because it's a lot of pressure. But there's been some academic research on metal and environmentalism and metal, and there's even been research on environmentalism in metal, in Australian metal. And Psycroptic isn't mentioned in this study. I'll just so
put that out there.
Put that out there. But I kind of wanted to put the conclusion of one of these articles to you and see kind of what you thought about it. So just like how you vibe with kind of the way they're approaching it, because they claim that in wrapping up their review of a number of Australian bands, they say, quote, the predilection for misanthropic and apocalyptic visions of ecological disaster in the music of bands might even be counterproductive in that the work to socialize people into thinking that nothing can be done. Pessimism and hopelessness are part of the problem. Misanthropy and apocalypticism can even be reconfigured not as responses to environmental issues, but as symptoms or even causes of them. Going on to argue, an aesthetic dominated by death, destruction, and decay is an aesthetic that struggles to incorporate even pragmatic, let alone optimistic representations of possible ways of life. So given this kind of take, we're wondering, do you view this perspective as this kind of conclusion as productive, or do you, on the other hand, view your lyrics as being hopeful or pushing for change, or do you vibe with it? Do you see your lyrics as pessimistic, and potentially creating a risk that people that hear them think that nothing can be done and we're all kind of screwed?
Well, God, I could see that people could, when you put it like that people could take either view on my lyrics. It is more of a look what the fuck we're doing type. That's like what I'm trying to, I suppose, get across. Look what we're doing. We could do so much better. But yeah, I could see, like, reading it from that, I could see that people could take it as a negative of me saying we're fucked, basically. So,
but
yeah.
Personally, your goal is not to say it's hopeless, but it's kind of like, are you saying that it's more like kind of a wake up call, a rally to do something?
Yeah.
Surely you're not just saying like, oh well, it's hopeless, don't worry about it.
Yeah, no, definitely if we keep going, we're going to be fucked.
Okay, because I mean there is metal that just goes like life is bad.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of that out there, no doubt. But I think I guess at its core, if you read through a lot of stuff, I think more people do come from a positive mindset, if that makes sense. But maybe the wording used can be taken either way. I don't know. But I mean, most people I know, black metal definitely has got that satanic element and stuff like that. But I mean, a lot of modern bands, I think, take from the same sort of approach as bands like what we do, where it's not looking at that. It's not looking at things from a negative perspective, or trying to put a negative spin on things is probably a better way to describe it.
Is there space for like hope for the future of the planet in extreme metal?
I think it's got to be written the right way. But yeah, I think I've said this before in interviews, like metal, like extreme metal especially, it's a lot of the lyrics are almost like traditional, if that makes sense. They've got to be extreme. They can't be, they can be any way they want to be, but traditionally they've got, I don't know, there's something about them. I don't know, I can't even describe where I'm going with this now.
No. Yeah. Keep going though.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's, like, in my opinion, on the way extreme metal lyrics need to be written, they can't be, flowers in the field type thing. It's got to be, it's got to be a big, powerful sort of perspective, whether it be positive, negative, or whatever. I don't know. It's got to be able to be delivered mighty, if that makes any sense.
Do you ever feel pressure from this tradition? Like, have you ever wanted to write something and it's like, nah, it's not metal? Nah.
I think that just naturally go. I mean, I've been listening to death metal and extreme metal since I was 10, 11 years old. So now I'm 41. So I think it's just ingrained in me.
Fully brainwashed, fully Stockholm syndrome into it. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt.
Okay.
I'm a lifer of the game.
Well, like, that being said, you don't have all of the traditional trappings of extreme metal lyrics, because we did want to talk about what isn't in your lyrics, and we have to talk about then discussions of gore and swearing as well. So first let's start off talking about gore, because there isn't a lot of implied death and darkness in your lyrics, but there isn't any like graphic violence that's considered to be very kind of prolific in death metal lyricism. So is there a reason why you avoided gore in your lyric writing at all?
It's just like I was saying earlier, like the gore and horror and stuff like that, it's just something that I have got zero interest in. So it's something that I suppose it just never, because I don't have interest in it, it's just something that never really crossed my mind to bring into it. And it would be something that wouldn't be it wouldn't be real to me. Like it'd just be, yeah, I don't know. It would just feel fake for me to write about that, like add that sort of stuff into my music, because it's not something that interests me in the slightest.
Well, another thing that's absent, as just mentioned, is swearing. On lyrics from Inherited Repression, there's 2 fucks and 1 shit, and lyrics from Self-Titled have 2 fucks. But after that, there's no swearing at all. You swore in this interview, but why do you use swear words so sparingly on those first 2 releases and then abandon it? Like, why is swearing something that doesn't appear at all in your art?
Don't know, to be honest. I don't feel it's something that always needs to be there. It's an impact thing, I suppose, in lyrics. In everyday use, me being a construction site worker from Tasmania, it does come into everyday vocabulary. But I don't know. I suppose it's never been a word that I feel fits very often. You know, maybe as a real impact word, but yeah, I don't know. And it's something I never actually really think to put it in anymore, and I don't know why. Because someone else did ask me about this and said you haven't had any swearing in the last few albums, and there's very sparingly in the first couple that I sang on, and yeah, I just don't know. It just never comes up to me, or it just never comes to mind to actually use it in there.
Not to go all like, like psychoanalysis or anything, but is there any subconscious desire to differentiate like your identity on the stage versus your identity in the construction site, like the 2 different yous?
The thing is, when I'm on stage, I swear quite a bit between songs and stuff. Just
in the banter, you mean?
Yeah. My stage band is fucking come on, and and all that sort of stuff. And it's yeah. So I don't think that comes into it. So yeah, I'm not shy with it when I'm actually on stage. It's just actually in the lyrics. It just never seems to really come up.
Well, that is kind of a trend that we've observed, like among like the Australian bands we've interviewed, is that like, when we do ask them about their swearing, like typically they say like, well, I swear a lot in everyday life. But they also do say the same thing that, although they don't swear a lot in their lyrics, like they do tend to swear when they're on stage. So why do you think there's this disconnect? Because obviously it's not necessarily the case that like swearing is like unsuitable for metal in general, because it's often appears in the actual performance side of things, right? So so why is there this difference, do you think?
Why are Australians putting walls on I mean, y'all swear quite a bit, so like why is it that like lyrics are this sacred space for Australian metal musicians, where it's like I can swear at my job, I can swear at the stage, but I can't swear in my lyrics? Like what's
I suppose there's got to be a boundary for us somewhere with it. And I guess that's just where it is. Probably the place where it would be most appropriate.
Okay.
I don't know, we're all backwards.
Well, on the note of Australian then, one feature that's also missing is there's no elements of like Australian English in your lyrics whatsoever. Is this conscious? Like is there something that you would have like against putting Australianisms into Psycroptic's lyrics?
Yeah, and I think it's that whole well, for one, I mean, we tour a lot abroad, and so I'm very conscious that when we're touring with Americans, Europeans and stuff, half the time when we're just talking our native tongue, they have no idea what the fuck we're talking about. So it is definitely that whole thing of, you get with pop music and stuff, the whole thing is to neutralize the accent and that side of things. And I guess it's that whole thing of with your lyrics, it's like neutralizing that wording so that it makes sense to everybody, because with our music, we sell probably just as much outside of Australia as we do within Australia. So I suppose it's just keeping that whole thing so it can be read and made sense of by everyone worldwide.
Like, American bands don't like neutralize their stuff, right? They'll come over to Australia and be like, yeah, I took the elevator to the concert, right? And they're fine with that, right? Like,
yeah, but I think, and it's that whole thing. I think American English is probably the most widely understood. And a lot of that's, I suppose, from the entertainment industry being so big in America that goes out worldwide. So I guess that's probably why. But I mean, with Australian, I mean, yeah, it can get pretty wild for people. I mean, we've got an American bass player, and for his first few years in the band, he had no idea what we were talking about half. He's picked it up now after spending 8 years on the road with us, but and it's just trying to keep it relevant to everyone worldwide.
I mean, yeah, I still get tripped up every once in a while. I've been here for like a decade now.
Yeah. And there'd still be stuff that people would say, and you'd be like, I have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. I'm sure.
For sure, yeah, every once in a while.
Yeah, I mean, then do you think that like being in Australia or being Australian like influences your lyrics like at all, or not? Yeah.
Well, you mentioned environmental things, so besides the environmental issue, yeah.
Probably not. No.
So like, there's no like Tasmanianness to Psycroptic's metal or specifically their lyrics. Like, does being a Tasmanian? No, you don't. No.
I mean, other people might look at it and see it, but yeah, I don't think so. Personally.
So there's nothing that kind of like separates your kind of like lyrical approach, like aside from in the ways we just discussed, like from that like equivalent in America.
I don't reckon so.
Yeah, I am surprised. Like, I admit, I did not expect just a categorical no.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's interesting.
Like, do you think? I guess to open it up a little bit, does metal in general kind of not have a geographical feel to it in a way? Like, I mean, for instance, like if we compare it to hip hop or something, right? There's definite like
you can tell where someone's from.
Yeah.
Very localized, yeah.
And let's like take folk metal and just like completely ignore its existence for a bit, because that obviously, often incorporates just instruments that are kind of local. But like death thrash black, for instance, do they have much of an international character, or do you think there is kind of like just a blending of
I think back in the early days it did. There was very much, you've got your Swedish death metal sound, which was very, very distinct, back in the late 80s, early 90s. Your Swedish black metal had a certain sound, Norwegian black metal had a certain thing to it, American death metal had a certain thing. But I think, from those, formative years of different elements of the extreme metal, where, you had certain groups of people that were using certain equipment, and so they'd get a certain sound, and, those local scenes would gravitate to making similar music to each other, obviously. But I think now, as extreme metal's been a genre for such a long time now, and it's so, it's so readily available everywhere, I just think the sound of everything has really just sort of melded into each other. So you get a band that they might have that real like Swedish death metal sound, but then you look and you're like, oh, well, they're from, I don't know, Chicago or somewhere like that. That probably wouldn't have happened back in 1992, but these days, and that's just how it is. So I don't think I think with Australian bands, I think it's not happening so much now as what it was a few years back, but you could always tell with Australian bands, there was always just something that was slightly different about them to European or American bands. But like, you could never sort of put the finger on it, but everything was just done slightly different. But I think even now that's sort of gone, like, there's a lot of, highly successful Australian bands that are really, hitting the world stages and stuff like that. So I don't even think that's a thing anymore.
To build off that, what was the Australian feel back in the day?
I don't know. And I spoke to a guy on a podcast last year about this, actually. He was a guy that lives in England, and he's right into the Australian scene, and he said, I can never put my finger on it, but he said with Australian bands, he said they're always great, but they're always slightly different to what you'd expect for the style that they're playing. And I definitely agree with that, but actually putting the finger on what that is, or what that was, I never could do it.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, we'll have to look into that.
Just leave it as a mystery, I suppose. Yeah.
No, it was more so, I mean, you look at bands like, from the late 90s, bands like a Bramlin, Misery, Blood Dust. So, there was just, I don't know, if you check it out, and it might be a lot of it might be to do with the way music was, metal was produced down here, because there wasn't sort of, back in those formative days, there wasn't so many studios that were sort of dedicated to extreme metal. Is what you might have got like in places like Florida and Oslo and stuff like that.
So like the lack of places to go kind of consolidated.
I think so. And I think more than anything, a lot of it down in Australia back in those early days. Like, I mean, the first two Psycroptic albums were just recorded in a studio in Hobart that they predominantly recorded jingles for TV. Guy that worked didn't know anything about extreme music. He'd done a little bit of rock and roll, but he did a great job of what he was doing. But it was more people were dealing with like studio engineers that were probably more used to recording rock and roll and stuff like that, as opposed to flat out double kicks and 250 BPM and drumming and rest and someone screaming like an idiot into the microphone. So it was probably the sound of extreme metal recorded in the way of rock and roll, maybe.
Interesting.
But there was always something about that early stuff that you could. It's very much had the Australian sound, but yeah, I think that's very much on the outer now, though.
Well, like, given that, then, like, what would you say, if we can kind of like tie this together, is like the principal role of lyrics in Psycroptic's music and in the extreme metal genre more broadly?
I think in the extreme metal genre, you find a lot of bands, I think the lyrics don't actually mean shit to them, to be honest. It's just, and that's the thing with it, is you've got a lot of, you see it probably more in the death metal realm, like especially with all this like guttural slam, where it's like you listen to the song, even if you had the lyric sheet there, you think, fuck, there's no way that he's saying any of that stuff on the lyric sheet. And it's just something to have written there, so you can have a song title and you can have some pictures on your merch or whatever. So in Psycroptic, I think it is more important to us, because I try to make everything very audible. So, or when I sing, when I'm in the studio, Joe, our guitarist, he is also a studio engineer, so he records me. And I always check with him once I've done a take, can you understand what I say? And he'll repeat the line back to me most of the time. And, and that's when we know it's good enough. And I think a lot of that's, more so with the choruses and stuff. You're trying to, like we were the Keepers, you're trying to have like an impactful chorus that'll, it's powerful and it's big and it needs to be heard. And so I think it's with us more so in our later part of our career, where we've had choruses and stuff, it's very much a more important role for us now than what it was probably back on the first probably 4 albums.
So, I mean, given that increase in import, like, what would you say is sort of the purpose nowadays? Like, your last album, where do lyrics sit as part of the ultimate art form for you?
Pretty high, but I do think within Psycroptic, every element, every person on the album, I think is just as important as the other, because we are very, like, musicality has always been a massive part of what we are as a band. Mm-hmm. So I think the riffs, I mean, Joe writes incredible riffs. Dave's an absolutely incredible drummer. So I think I don't see the lyrics or the vocals as being any more important. I think the whole thing is just as important as each other, and it just binds the whole thing together, I think. And it just having those big lyrics in the big choruses just make the whole thing have more impact, especially on the live front as well. You get those big choruses where people can sing along, and you do get it at some shows where it'll be the whole crowd will be singing along in a chorus, arms in the air, and the energy that it can create is just incredible.
So do you have, like, besides just seeing it live, do you have fans that come up to you and talk to you about the stuff you've done?
I do sometimes. It's not as common as what it used to be. But you noticed the change over time? Yeah, definitely. But I think, I don't know. I mean, it's when, like, in the younger part of our career, I think it was more that when we were out playing shows and stuff, we were putting ourselves out into the crowd more, like after shows, before shows, during shows and stuff like that. We would, as we were younger, we'd be out hanging out with fans and drinking some beers and all that stuff. So there was a lot more conversation there. But now, as we get older, we don't hang out, we don't drink. And so it probably is just more people don't have the opportunity as much, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
More than anything else. Age is getting the better of me.
Well, was there anything that we didn't ask in this interview that you wanted us to ask about?
Did we miss a theme?
Did we miss anything?
Yeah. No, you've been very thorough in your research. When I listened to the episode with Sam the other week, I thought, wow, this will be interesting to see, the interpretations and stuff you guys have of my lyrics, which you pretty much bang on with all the way that you've read and interpreted what I do, which is, it's awesome.
Good. Yeah. It's good. We're at least on target.
Yeah. It'd be bad if everything we brought up was just like completely.
Definitely off.
Wrong.
No, wrong.
Yeah.
Sick. Well, thank you so much then for taking the time to talk to us. It's been really interesting to hear about, like, you guys have been around for quite some time, so kind of hearing about these changes and even, we don't meet a lot of bands that have gone through 3 lyricists either. So that kind of process is really, really fascinating.
Yeah, and it's been interesting as well. I mean, like what we were saying before, it's like, really changing the style of the music and the direction of lyrics and stuff. It's been a really awesome journey as well. And I think, as looking back at where the band started to where we are now, it's so, it's such a massive difference. So it's been quite the journey over the last, I've been with the band 19 years this year now, and they've been going since 99. So it's what's that, 24, nearly 25 years. Jeez, that's making me feel old now. I've done it for nearly half my life now.
Yeah, that is a shockingly long time, but it's great to like talk to you, particularly because we have talked to a lot of Australian bands, and it's great to like hear from someone who's been participating in the scene, active in the scene for such a long time.
Yeah, it's been awesome. It's been quite the ride. It's nice to sort of be getting back into it again now after such a long hiatus.
Well, we were going to ask you, like, is there anything that you'd like to promote, anything you'd like to draw our listeners' like attention to as we kind of finish up?
Yeah, so we got so the band's going on the US tour in, when's that, August, which I won't be on. But when we back in Australia, it's 14th of September in Melbourne, 15th, I think, of September I'm not sure actually. So I don't even know that might not be announced yet, whatever that one was. But anyway, yeah, definitely 14th of September we'll be in Melbourne at, I can't remember the venue either. Yeah, and Psycroptic will be out in the States in August, but without me, it'll be Jason from Origin, who also sung with me on our last album, doing vocals on it.
Oh,
Awesome.
sick.
Yeah, so unfortunately I won't be able to make it, but be next year for me.
So where's the best place for everyone to kind of keep up with any of your shows that you're playing locally or internationally, or any of your releases?
Everything's usually we're trying to be more active now on our Facebook page. Instagram's usually a bit slow, but Facebook, usually things get pretty updated. Merch, everything can be bought through direct merch in Australia. There's heaps of stuff there, so check shit out.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll have those links in the description.
Cool.
Sweet.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I know it's it's getting late here, and you got kids put to bed. I got kids put to bed. Thanks. Hopefully we'll see you down here live. And cheers. Really appreciate it.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Have a good night.
Thanks a lot. Thank you for listening to Lingua Italica. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you stay tuned for our next episode. Before we leave, we just wanted to acknowledge that this podcast is recorded on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation and the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay respects to their elders, past and present.